Also broadcasting live on our VIP backstage area. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching this recording if you're watching it after 3 p.m. We are here today to talk about the art of power, feminine empowerment with Ashley and myself. And I'm so excited to be here because today we've got some real good topics. But before we go in, let's just check in. Tell me, how are you doing? Put it on the comments. Give us a little hearts. Tell us you're there. And then if you have any questions along the journey of this call, please head on over to www.hackmankind.com. Make sure you have a VIP access, backstage access, and also put in your Q&A in the Q&A section on the backstage, all your questions and comments. How are you doing, Ashley?
I'm doing well. It's been an eventful day and week. I'll just say that.
Oh my goodness. Yes, we were just talking about it on the backstage green room area. And it's been like and you've got, and you know, with all the things going on, you've got the smile, beautiful energy. It's just incredible. So thank you for being here. Thanks for showing up. So we have two subjects today. So one, as always, we have the theme of the week, which is time, right? And today's hack will start with your priorities, which I know ties kind of nicely with dancing with boundaries, which is one of the things that you wanted to talk to us. I'm actually very excited about this call because this is one of the things that I would love to see more improvement in. So Ashley's going to be talking about dancing with boundaries. What are they and why do they matter? And, you know, do we have good boundaries? How do we need to accept them? Learn more about them with Ashley today. So where should we start? Time, hack of the day, start with priorities, or dancing with boundaries?
Well, I think that they, like you said, they all kind of relate. So if anyone has any thoughts or comments about the hack of the day or time, I'd say leave the comments for us. And then we'll weave in how those work with boundaries, because I think that they definitely connect with one another.
Amazing. So let's start it. What are boundaries?
Cool. So I love this topic, and it's become more and more evident, especially during this time of COVID. You know, what are boundaries? Basically, boundaries are something that set our physical space. They set our feelings, our needs, our responsibilities from others, and they tell people really how they can treat us, what's acceptable, what is not acceptable. So when I say dance with boundaries, the thing with dancing is it's not rigid. There's flow, there's movement, there's, you know, bending. And so with the boundaries, it's really important that we set them, but we have to set them with some sort of flexibility, right? Because if we set them without any flexibility as a way to protect ourselves, then what happens is we turn these boundaries into walls. And when we turn the boundaries into walls, we distance ourselves from the connection that we as humans truly want. And with this time of quarantine, it's like connection is so important now than ever, and connection to self, but also connection to other humans. So from a boundaries perspective, it's really important to actually know what your boundaries are. And I've been talking about it actually a lot with my clients who are, you know, have their adult children who move back in, or it's just a partner and a wife and, you know, husband and wife or whatever, like working together. It's really about knowing what they are, because it's so vital to maintaining our healthy, loving, and respectful relationships. So that's a little bit about boundaries. I think one thing that I want to say that they're not ultimatums, they're not threats. The intention is not to hold things back or, again, like I said, put walls up. It's really about protection and making sure that we have more of a loving relationship and space with one another. So
yes, I love that you mentioned that, because one of the thoughts one of the feedbacks I've had when I said, oh, I need to have healthier boundaries, I need to know how to do boundaries better. And they're like, oh, boundaries, it sounds so limiting, or it sounds like you're, you know, it's like you're putting walls, right? But it really isn't that, especially the feminine energy was used to saying yes all the time.
Right.
And so what would you say for somebody who has a hard time getting clear on what their boundaries are, and second, setting them and honoring them, because it's very easy, especially with people you love. They're like, oh, but with more certainty than you have. Or I know for a fact, for me, if I'm with around somebody I love very, very much, and that ultimately has a much higher level of certainty that comes to me saying, da 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 da, I'll be very likely to go, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's your recommendation?
So I would say first understanding again, like what are boundaries and what does boundaries really mean? Because for you, if someone, or just in general, someone might take it as a form of rejection, or a form of defensiveness or closed offness. And it's really important to understand really that actually a boundary is about setting what's okay, what's not, so that the relationships can grow and evolve. And that includes our relationship with ourselves. So I would really say that our boundaries are tied to our self-worth. And for someone who's afraid to set boundaries or doesn't know how to set boundaries, it's also taking a look at, how do you feel about you? Where do you need to empathize more with yourself or with other people? And taking a look at, are my boundaries about protecting myself? Am I putting these up because I have some sort of sense of panic or fear arising? Um, or I might be afraid to set boundaries because if I set them, people are going to leave me and I'm going to be alone. So instead, I'm just going to let people walk all over me, and it'll be at the expense of my own health or well-being, or whatever. And so what I mean by that is, maybe like you only want to spend time with friends or family members when they aren't drinking, right? And so if they are drinking, it's like your boundary's like, I don't want to spend time with you. Or maybe you have a boundary that you don't do dinner on a first date. Like maybe it's just we meet for a coffee or we do meet for a drink, but that's it. Or your boundary could be something along the lines of, a friend asks you to help with something, but you're really busy with a project, or you need some self-care time. Like it's so important to just recognize what your own boundaries are and check in with yourself, and then communicate those out, trusting that it's okay to say no. And some people might energetically fall away. Some relationships might change because they were holding on to you out of neediness and out of a need to get something for you or have something or whatever it might be. So if someone, doesn't stick around because of the boundaries that you set, then maybe they're not your people anymore, because you deserve to be supported. And part of that support really is honoring of yourself. And the right people will be there, and there will be lots of love and lots of support when you do honor yourself.
I completely agree, and I find that sometimes the less you are, so how you schedule things for yourself, or you
Yeah.
have those boundaries, and
Yes.
then you don't honor those
Mhm.
commitments. I think it's more a commitment to ourselves, and we stop
Yeah.
honoring them and stop respecting it. It's a lot harder to respect someone who doesn't respect themselves. And I really I want to, it sounds a little harsh, but really that's it. And I'm somebody that can say it because I've been there. I'm happy that I'm much better at it than I was 5-10 years ago. But I remember, like, I definitely, it wasn't that people were walking all over for me, on me, or whatever you call the expression,
Mhm.
but certain people. And I was just bending myself into a pretzel. I think that's the right word. And
Yeah.
that does not work. And I think the least and I wasn't respecting myself. It's not their fault. It's really
Right. What was the impact to you? I'm really curious if,
horrible.
okay.
The sense of self.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a sense of self, um, isolation, um, out to the public, with,
Yep.
but inside, like, hurt. And then it got harder. It got
Hmm.
a lot harder to set boundaries because, if we think of the people around me, or whoever the person I'm talking about, or 2-3 people I'm talking about, for them, it's like they know Jessica that's okay with all these things, when really she wasn't okay with all these things. And then all of a sudden she's saying she's not. Like, there's a lot more friction there. So it's a lot harder to then go back to having those healthy boundaries. It's a lot harder saying, this is who I am. This is what's okay for me. Not making the other person wrong, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
not okay for me. I love you and appreciate you. And when you drink, I don't want to be around you, for example, like using your
Yeah.
example. And then you can get mad, you can do whatever you want. I'm not making you wrong. I'm not telling you not to drink. I'm just saying I just don't want that in my life. And but if you're around that said person for 5 years, and then the accumulation of the, you're also not going to be very nice. You're also not going to be yourself, authentic. So there's things that show up with that. And then 5 years down the line, or even 5 days down the line, depending on what we're talking about, saying, you know what, I really just don't want to be around. And it works, but it's a lot harder. It's a lot
Right.
harder. Which
Right.
brings me to the
Right.
question of why are boundaries so important?
Yeah. And it's your self-worth, and it's training people how to treat you so that, as you said, you can live more authentically, you can feel more aligned, you can feel more empowered and at peace. You use the word sense of self, and I think that those words, sense of self, are so related to our power as a human being, our power to make choices, our power to determine how we want our experience of the world to be. So being around people who drink, again, I guess the drinking every week, and we'll just use that as an example to stay with, being around them might have worked for a period of time, but it no longer works for you. And that's changed. And so you have to have the personal sense of self to say, this doesn't work for me anymore. This is no longer aligned. So I have to choose something different. I have to choose a different boundary. And it may be uncomfortable. It may disrupt people. So then the question becomes, is it more important for have people to continue to go along with these other people and just not rock the boat and you suffer on this side? Or is it more important to choose what's in alignment for your heart, your soul, and what makes you feel good? You have to make that choice. To me, even though this stuff is uncomfortable, choosing me and what makes me feel inner peace, and that I respect the people outside of me and do it in a respectful way, to me, that's always the choice, regardless of how uncomfortable it is. But everybody has free will to make their own choices. So it's really just an adjustment of what's gonna bring you the calmness and the alignment. And so, like, if I relate this again to like hack mankind, like what is the hack that I would say? And actually, before I go there, what I also want to say is that boundaries don't have to be something negative. That's the other thing is, okay, we're giving the drinking example, but I have a client who had her 2 adult children move back into her house during this corona thing. And so it was all about setting boundaries to make sure that, hey, I'm going to work here during the day, and this is when I need time and space for myself. This is when they need time and space for themselves, so that they too could feel like they were just living in a calm environment despite all the chaos that is sort of happening in the world right now. And so that they could all come from a more loving, respectful place of themselves and her 2 adult children, a son and a daughter. So that's a big dynamic, right? In a lot of ways. So even just having the conversation with yourself and then having the conversation with those people, it really allows, she told me, she's like, it was a wonderful conversation. It really allowed us to have a deeper understanding and actually create more connection with us. So boundaries can create connection as well. And I just want to put that out there, that it's not a negative thing, despite, how it looks oftentimes.
Amazing. And then, so we have a few more questions pouring in that I will
Great.
read right here. So thank you so much for that. And I totally concur. I mean, it rings so true. And it's a reminder, it's a constant reminder. That's why I love being on these calls with you, Ashley, and on our calls with also Sarah on Monday and all the other calls too. But these calls for this are so powerful because it's a beautiful reminder, because we know these things deep down. We know this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
a reminder, and constantly listening to it. Even personally, there's things I'm not applying yet, and this is why we've hacked mankind, is adding these things. It's stacking little distinctions every single day, where I can now be a different person than I was a month ago, and
Yeah.
we'll see in a year. So I thank you so much for this beautiful share. So Diana's asking on the backstage area, what if I have set boundaries but have trouble following through with them?
That's a really, really good question. So what if I have set boundaries and have trouble following through with them? Well, I would look at the boundary and look at what need is the boundary meeting. And if you're not following through, what's the secondary gain that you're getting by not following through on the boundaries? Are you getting love? Are you getting approval? Are you getting to continue to? I've been working recently, just to air it out and not put it on you, Diana, or I think that was who you said asked the question. I've been working on a not enough story, that a deeper level of it that I found. And for me, I wouldn't follow through with boundaries because I didn't think I was enough. I didn't think I was worthy of enough to have certain boundaries at times. So what I would say is really just take an inner look and go back to what Jessica, you just said, which is listening to your intuition and really listening to your heart. What I love and where I've been doing a lot of decision making is there's sort of four places we make decisions. There's the head, there's the heart, there's our gut, and then there's our genitals. And basically decision making needs to happen, like true aligned decision making needs to happen from the neck down. The last place is here because our brains we're brilliant, right? And they're wired for protection, for safety, for justification, for whatever it is. So if your heart's telling you something, if your gut's telling you something, when it comes to relationships and bedroom stuff, if your genitals are telling you something, like that's where you really need to listen in. And it's a practice in really just listening to that intuitive sense. And it does mean you have to include here. And including here with the boundary setting is understanding, taking the time. Like how many people, I guess I would ask everyone here, how many people actually take the time to say, what are my boundaries? And when I say boundary, what am I a hell absolute yes to? And what am I an absolute no to when it comes to my relationship, my marriage, dating, work, how you treat others, relationships with yourself, health, money, helping others? What is it? And really take some time to take a look at it, because I'm willing to bet that 90% of humans have actually never asked themselves those questions. And the more information we have, the more awareness we have, then we get to make better choices. And it sounds so simple, but it actually can be that simple, especially if we get this out of the way sometimes.
100%. It's very useful to use our brains, but first our intentions, our boundaries, our priorities. I think I feel it's very important to first go into the feeling.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then use our brains to actually manifest it. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have a few more questions, Ashley, and right here is let me see. Oh, these are good ones. Let's start with the middle. This one. I have a hard time setting boundaries. How can I change that?
So that, I think, goes back to self-worth, and really taking a look at how much love and compassion and worth you have for yourself, because there's likely something there. And I would ask you, what is it that's hard about setting boundaries? And maybe ask yourself the same question a couple times. Like if this person was in front of me, I would say, tell me what's so difficult about setting boundaries. And I would say, tell me what's so difficult about setting boundaries. Probably 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. I would actually challenge you to ask, or invite you. I don't want to challenge you. I want to invite you to ask 10 times and write it out and have the question there. And then ask yourself the question, tell me what is so hard about setting boundaries, and write out the first answer that comes. And the more you ask, you're going to get into a different part of your brain, and you're going to find some sort of information that's going to be a little bit of an aha for you to start to pull the pictures, the
So
pieces of the
I
picture
totally
together.
understand that, and that's definitely one of the things, even personally, that it is correlated with self-worth. 100%. I agree with you. One of the things that comes to mind after you said that is, okay, well, once I have the haha of, okay, I don't think I'm worthy, or I'm scared of rejection. A lot of times it's, fear of not being loved or not being enough,
Yep.
or also fear of missing out, which leads to one of the questions. then what? Like, okay, I have the realization, but okay, then what? I'm still afraid, or I still don't really have that huge sense of
Yeah.
self-worth. What do you do then?
Yeah. So look at the story, because it's a story. Everything that happens in our life is a story. Everything that we do have in our life or don't have in our life is because of beliefs that we have in our head and stories that we repeat. So, my invitation for that person is to take a look at, okay, well, who is someone who I think has self worth? What do you think their story is? If I had self worth, if I had self belief, if I already was enough, if I already loved myself, if I was already deserving, what would my story be? Write down that story and read that story to yourself once a day, twice a day. I would even do it in the mirror, looking in your own eyes, because then you're activating a lot of different systems and putting that into place, and you're rehashing the story. And as you repeat the story, it's going to have shifts in your physiology. It's going to have shifts in your emotional and energetic body. So we all have the power to create the first story. That means we have the power to change it to a whole new story itself.
Amazing. I completely agree. And that reminds me, I was just listening to a book. I like audiobooks, but it's an actual book called Who Changes Everything.
Oh.
And what the book, I haven't finished it 100%, but the general gist for me is basically we all have these different sides of us, you know, these different personalities, different
Yeah.
avatars. And I remember doing this exercise at a seminar, and then with one of my coaches, and I called my higher self, or Alessandra. So when I call on
Mm.
Alessandra, Alessandra definitely has a huge amount of self, and that really works. And I wrote down everything, like, what does she eat? What does she, you know, what kind of music does she play? What kind of clothes does she wear? What, you know, like all these different aspects. And then it becomes easier. It becomes easier to get into that energy. It's like, okay, I actually did that. Oh my goodness, do I have time to take a quick story? Yeah, a little quick story.
Yes, please do. And I love that you wrote that. I just have to pause you really quick. I love that you wrote it down and you recognize it's an aspect of you. Just like my story, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, is an aspect of me. It's not all of me. So anyway, continue. I have another idea after that, but I
Yes,
want to hear the
and
story.
it gets me excited to even I forgot the story, so I'm happy to remember it. So I was doing this exercise and I was practicing you know, what would Alessandra do? And I went to a store, one of like Marshall's kind of store where it has a ton of different brands like discounted.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw these boots, and they were like sparkly boots, like super sparkly, like you super sparkly boots. And I looked at them, I'm like, these are nice. And then I'm like, oh, I'm too old for this. Or like, this is not, you know, elegant women, like, you know, always like beliefs. Elegant women don't buy this. This is like for kids or whatever. And then I asked, what would Alessandra do? And I have an image of Alessandra, and she is glamorous. She is a supermodel looking kind of girl. She is gorgeous, and she would totally rock those. Like even on a with a blazer, with a thing. So I put on
Yes.
those shoes. And my point of the story isn't just that. Yeah, this is really cool. I bought the shoes. They are my favorite boots. They don't make them anymore, and it makes me sad. However, I bought like similar, like they're tennis shoes that are the same brand, sparkly too, but it's not the same as the boots. I have worn those boots so much, you have no idea. And one of the things I would take them to seminars. And for those who know Tony Robbins does this retreat, for his platinum partners in Hawaii. And it's a relationship retreat, 10 days or 8 days, something like that. Very high ticket item. So very like 300 and something people were attending that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was doing an intervention. So an intervention is when he's helping somebody live, and it's like basically coaching there in the room. And at one point he comes all the way to my row, grabs me, takes me to the front, and he goes, take off your shoes. I looked at him, I'm like, okay. And this girl that he was working with, she had been, you know, she had a crazy background. Don't want to like go too much into details with that, but they were totally living a transformation. She was extremely her masculine, very unhappy. You know, her dad had taught her to hunt since she was little, skin animals, like
Yep.
He wanted
Yep.
a boy. And so I took my shoes off, and she was extremely tall. So they didn't fit her, obviously, but she grabbed the shoe. She took the shoe. She hugged the shoe. And it just gives me goosebumps now just talking about it.
Oh,
And
I
she
have a goosebumps
started
too.
pouring. She just started crying, and she totally shifted. And the little girl in her woke up, and she hadn't been woken up in years. Years. You could see that. And it gives me goosebumps. And the reason I'm talking about this is it's not selfish. It's not selfish to have boundaries, to have that higher self, and to look out for yourself. Because not only did I make me happy of having those sparkly shoes, everybody loved the sparkly shoes. Everybody knew about the sparkly shoes. I already asked where the sparkly shoes came from. And it totally shifted somebody's life. It really did. Like, she hugged those shoes, and I saw the transformation. I mean, does it mean that it wouldn't have happened without me? Probably it would have, but I don't know. Things all happen for a reason. And so I don't know, I just felt compelled to share that story. So thank you for the reminder. I will call on Alessandra more often.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, right? Because you connected to that aspect of yourself who wants to have the shoes. And for that woman, she can still be the hunting, fishing, whatever, but there is that woman inside of her. There is the aspect, the piece of her, the little girl in her who wanted to wear the shoes. And we all have that little girl or little boy inside of us that still has certain wants and desires. So allow that to come through and know what boundaries that part of you needs. But if you need to like get into this boundary setting and understanding, like start asking. And if it is uncomfortable to ask the you and the physical that you connect to now, like Jessica said, then set up a personality, Alessandra, and just go with it, right? And just say, my higher self, I'm gonna ask questions of this person and this part of me, and then allow it to go. So the real sort of takeaway from here is that boundaries can be really empowering. And the invitation for all of you is just to take a look at what your boundaries are. What are you an absolute yes to, and what are you a hell no to? And if you just start to, you don't have to do it all at once, but just at least the awareness is the first step. And then start asking yourself, what am I when it comes to relationships, when it comes to food, when it comes to drinking, when it comes to exercise, when it comes to work, you know, whatever it might be. I mean, what are your boundaries when it comes to your Facebook account? Do you take everybody's friend requests? Do you let everybody comment on your page? Do you share anything? Like, what do you have around your social media boundaries? There's so many ways to take a look at it, and it's all about what is going to make you the happiest and make you radiate the way that Jessica was just radiating with a smile on her face when she was talking about those beautiful shoes. That's really what it's about.
Amazing. And I can't believe it's already 3:30. It goes by so fast, Ashley. We have two more questions that maybe you can touch on real quick, and then if we
Sure.
want to go deeper, we can talk about it, of course, next week. So first question is, I'm afraid to miss out on opportunities when I set boundaries. And then, so that you kind of touch on before, where you were saying they're not walls, they're not set in stone, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the questions. And then my
Well, and
partner,
to that one's super easy, right? There's
okay,
this FOMO, this idea, well, if I set a boundary, I have this fear, I'm going to miss out on something. Well, if you set this boundary, what about on the other side? What's the joy of missing out? JOMO, right? I'm sure some people have heard that. What do you get? What do you gain? What is the positive thing that you gain by setting the boundary? So it's just about changing the lens through which you're viewing the boundaries.
100%, you could be missing out on a ton load of the better stuff because it's more aligned with who you are and what you want.
Exactly.
So true.
Exactly.
And so the other one, just to finish up, my partner has a lot of boundaries. What is acceptable? When is enough enough?
Mm. So that's a conversation. I would say, when you say what is acceptable to them, or what is acceptable to you? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I would have a conversation about, tell me what this boundary gives you. Tell me what this boundary gives you. Tell me what this boundary gives you. And just asking, tell me what your boundary is. So you could actually do it this way. Tell me what your boundary is, and tell me what this boundary gives you. And the partner who's asking, just say thank you. You don't have to get into the details of it until afterwards, but just have the communication about what is the boundary and what does this boundary give for you or do for you. And then start to, then once you have an understanding of what they are, then maybe say, okay, I can understand that boundary. Here are some of mine, and let's have a conversation of either where we can compromise, or, you know, where we might just have to accept. Some of it is just about acceptance too, and allowing people to be who they're going to be, as long as it doesn't have a negative, hurtful impact on you.
100%. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Ashley. I will let you wrap up real quick with some final thoughts. Before I do that, I'm just a kind reminder that we are changing our platform here at Hack Mankind, and we will not be broadcasting on Facebook in the next few days or maybe a week or two. So make sure that you are signed up at www.hackmankind.com, so you will have access to our membership platform and our Hack Mankind 2.0. We will be here every Wednesday with Ashley, 3 p.m. Eastern time. And if the schedule changes a little, we will notify you by email. So that's why we want to make sure that we have your email, www.hackmankind.com. And you can also join us on the VIP backstage area and ask all these wonderful questions we've been asked. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you tomorrow, 8 a.m. for our founders call. Before we wrap up, Ashley, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts is just boundaries are a dance, and that's it. And just know, what am I, even just ask yourself, what am I a yes to? What am I a no to? And answer from here down. Trust your intuition, trust yourself. That's Amazing. What I got for today.
Thanks so much,
thank
Ashley.
you.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.